Thank you very much, Ken. And I'm really happy to say that Econoclasts was supported by the Templeton Foundation and by the Cyril Freedom Trust. Now, let me tell you, you might want to visit the bar before I continue.
You're tall, Brian.
I'm tall, yeah.
Speak up.
Speak up. You might want to visit the bar before I continue because a lot of what I have to say here is going to be kind of grueling. Maybe you want to pop a pill or have a loved one present. If you could hold on to something, it might be helpful. Because I'm going to mainly talk about the middle third of my book, Econoclasts. The first third is kind of a history of the oscillating behavior of the American economy from 1913 to 1969. The second third, however, is about the stagflation era from 1969 to 1982, and it really stunk. And then the last third is the great victory of supply-side economics under Reagan and after. But I'm actually going to mainly talk about that middle third. And as I say, you're not going to like it. It has been a big couple of weeks for the adjective historic. We've all recently seen or heard that word, historic, just about everywhere, in the newspapers, the internet news feeds, and public radio. The passage of the health bill has, of course, been the pretext. I saw that the Associated Press, as well as USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, and the Houston Chronicle, back where I live, all used that adjective in March in bold headlines. Historic health bill passes. Type in the term historic to the New York Times search engine, and 5 of the top 10 results that come up pertain to the health bill. Historic, the word, is one of the adjectives derived from the name of my profession, history. And let me tell you something about that word, historic. Historians almost never use it. They use the adjective historical, A-L at the end, all the time. Historical simply means having to do with the past. So it comes in handy when writing about history. Historic, however, refers to the amazing quality of something that happened in the past. And if that thing in the past, that historical thing, isn't amazing, it's not historic, even though it's historical. The reason historians generally keep away from historic is that it puts them out on a limb. This thing back when in history was amazing. Historians are concerned that they might be proven wrong if they speak in this way. No, that thing in the past you've identified was unusual, not amazing. It might be objected. It was superficially interesting, but on closer exam, run-of-the-mill. Apparently unique, but in reality common. If you keyword search the run of the flagship journal in academic history, the Journal of American History, which comes out quarterly, you'll see that outside references to architecture, the term historic is used in this organ about once or twice a decade. Yet care of the papers and the airwaves, we've been treated to it abundantly since late March. So when commentators jump at the chance to call something historic, historians smile. Okay, we laugh a little. I go into this because we pay a price when we leap to call things historic when we should just call them historical. We pay the price of misunderstanding. Moreover, we pay the price of basing our actions in navigating the challenges we face today on that misunderstanding. This intellectual mistake, I believe, is one we have roundly made in this country since this confounded recession started in the latter portion of 2008. For some reason, and almost immediately, we started saying that this economic crisis today was historic. It was maximal. Specifically, and we all heard this 1 million times, within a few months of September 2008, I challenge anyone to say they have not heard this 1 million times. It was the worst recession since the Great Depression. A cliché that today is as common as dirt. We jumped at the chance to call this economic rough patch we were experiencing historic. Nothing like it had happened since the greatest economic calamity of modern times, that 8 decades ago. Well, let me ask, has our recession, our economic crisis, really been historic? Has the stock market, for example, ever lost half of its value in a quick crash, as in 2008, 2009, and then regained about 60% of its loss in a snapback at any time in the years since the Great Depression? Because that's what happened in our crisis. Well, certainly, exactly this happened in 1974-75. So there's nothing historic there. How about, say, an unemployment rate peaking at 10.3%, as in late '09? Well, it was 11% in 1982. Again, nothing historic there. How about 5 quarters of GDP decline, as in 2008, 2009? Well, that happened from 1973 to 1975. Indeed, the drop in GDP from 1957 to 1958 was steeper, if not shorter, than the worst we've recently had. Okay, well, how about a mass failure in the banking system? Well, sure, the collapse of the 3,000-member savings and loan system in 1989. And by the way, during our own crisis of the last 2 years, we have not seen it impossible to borrow money because the prime rate of interest had blown past 20%, as in 1980. We have not seen 3 straight years of double-digit inflation, as in 1979 to 1981. We have not seen oil increase 14-fold in price, as it did from 1973 to 1980. We have not seen the stock market lose 75% in real value over the long term, as was the case from 1966 to 1982. We have not seen it take 3 times as many dollars to maintain your purchasing power over a decade, as was the case in the 1970s. And into the bargain, there was a home foreclosure crisis in the 1970s, particularly in California. I recount these facts to relate beyond a shadow of a doubt that our crisis today has not really proven historic, for it is only the worst economic crisis of the last 4, not the last 8 decades. And because we have allowed ourselves the mistake of forgetting the economic calamities of the 1970s, we have compounded this mistake by thereby not learning from the 1970s, specifically how we escaped them in favor of a fine, long run of prosperity that went on for a quarter century, from 1982 to 2007. Indeed, a run of prosperity so steady and so enduring that I, for one, am ready to deem it historic. Now, there's a very good reason that commentators have been quick to call the economic predicament of our day historic. The reason is that it is next to impossible to read books by professional historians detailing economic crises since the Great Depression. Most of all, it is next to impossible to find books written from the perspective of what solved those crises. When I began researching my book on the history of supply-side economics, Econoclasts, 5 years ago, I immediately ascertained, on doing the requisite literature searches, that not one book, scarcely even one article, had ever been written by a holder of a history PhD and an academic position on the supply-side revolution in economic policy, on the Reagan Revolution. And while I must compliment my colleagues in history for being parsimonious with the adjective historic, I must also fault them for manifesting no real interest in telling the story of how our nation was once laid so terribly low by the economic malaise of the 1970s, only to embark on the longest period of smooth, non-inflationary growth in its modern history. It is true that economists have striven to depict this history, but the specialty of economists is statistics and models.